I think you'll agree that Peachtree is a complex piece of software, and fortunately for us, it discreetly handles a lot of the things that it does in the background. If we really break it down though, all of these complex things that Peachtree does come down to three things as far as users are concerned. We work with lists, forms, and reports. Earlier in this course, we worked with lists. We sorted, we filtered, we added entries to them, so that part's done. What we need to do now is kind of take off our accounting hats for just a minute and put on our designer hats. We're going to take a look in this chapter at how we can customize forms. Take what's already there, modify it to look and feel the way that we want it to, and to behave the way that we want it to, so we can get that customized look and feel out of the output that we have from Peachtree, either by emailing or by printing. To do our work with forms, I've come back into my Erlendessa SPA file, and you can either do that by going to File, Open Recent, and choosing it from the list, or you can also restore it from the Chapter 10 folder under the project files on your desktop. Basically, when we talk about forms, these are the things that can be emailed or printed, and they can either be pre-printed or we can use blank pages. In general, forms are going to be specific to transactions, such as a particular customer or a particular invoice or a particular payment. The form designer allows us to modify forms to our taste. Now, most forms can be customized, but let's see what we might do on the most common type of form, which is probably going to be the invoice. In order to access this, we need to go to our Report and Forms menu, come to Forms, and choose Invoices and Packing Slips. From our list, we can see that the type is already selected at the top, and down at the bottom we have some specific forms, invoices with some pre-printed information, the good old pin-fed or continuous one, as well as a blank invoice. Let's go ahead and work with the blank invoice. I could simply right-click on this invoice and choose to customize. And I would be prompted to save the changes, but I am a little bit hesitant to do that. So what I'm going to do first is right-click on the one I want to customize and choose Save As. I'm going to call this one Invoice, and then at the end, Erlendessa. You can note here where these are actually being saved as part of the company folder, in the Forms folder, and then with a name at the end that ends in .frm. We'll go ahead and click on Save, and now we can see that our new saved version of this invoice is at the top. Now I can feel a little bit more comfortable customizing this one without worrying about possibly messing up the original. So now we'll right-click on our Invoice Erlendessa and choose Customize. As is usually the case, there are all kinds of things you can do in the Form Designer, and a lot of things I want to show you. I'm going to start by actually maximizing this window so we don't have to see any of the extra Peachtree stuff in the background. We don't want to be confused by that. There we go. Now we can see that we have some toolbars. I'm just going to move this one kind of out of the way over to the right. And I did want to show you that on the Options menu, you can see the different toolbars that are available for you. There's a main toolbar, an object toolbar, formatting, cursor position, and properties. And you can simply turn these on or off if you want to see them or you don't want to see them. Everything that we have on a form is actually called a control, and we can work with controls by moving them, sizing them, deleting them, or adding new ones. In order to select, you simply click, and you'll see that they get little sizing handles in a box around them. If you want to select more than one control at a time, you can hold either your Shift key or your Control key. I'm holding Shift on my keyboard, and then click on Additional Controls. So this way you can move things all together as a group instead of trying to move them one at a time. I can deselect by clicking off of it, and I'll just click one more time to select it again. It's very easy to move a control by simply getting the four-headed arrow like I have here and dragging it to a new location. Likewise, I can resize by moving over one of the sizing handles, getting the double-headed arrow, and dragging in or out, up or down to size it appropriately. Another option that you have for moving is to actually use your arrow keys. I'm going to move over to the right for just a second, and I'm going to click on Invoice, and I'm going to press my right arrow key a couple of times, just to show you that this nudges it over. The main reason I wanted to do this, though, was not just to show you a keyboard shortcut, but to show you that you have some alignment tools. I can't tell you how many times I've watched people honestly spend hours trying to nudge things back and forth and up and down, or to use their mouse to do it, and there's a faster way. If I have this label, which is now a little bit off to the right, and I also hold my Shift key and select Invoice Date, which is aligned where I want it to be, With 2 or more controls selected, I can move over to the toolbar on the left-hand side and click the Line Up button. And I can say Align Left. And now you'll see that everything popped over, and when I deselect, these are actually lined up perfectly without me having to spend a lot of time nudging back and forth and up and down. The rule here is that the objects align to the last one you selected. That actually becomes something called the foundation object. It has black sizing handles and all the rest are kind of grayed out. So remember to select the one that's in the position you want last, and then use that Line Up button in order to make it much faster and easier. Now, there is a lot of time we could spend talking about how to move and do things with controls, but I think you have the basics for now. What I would like to do is actually show you how to start modifying this. One thing that you can do, of course, is to modify things that are already there. Maybe for my company, I don't like the word invoice. Maybe that's just a little bit colder than we want. We want to have a little bit more personal touch to it. So I'm going to right-click on the selected control, and I'm going to choose Edit Text. I get a blinking insertion point. I can use regular word processing. In this case, I'm holding Shift and my arrow to the right key to select it, or I could have drug over it with my mouse. And I'm going to instead type Your Products and Services. So that's a little bit nicer. Now I'm going to go ahead and click off of the control. And of course we can see that it doesn't fit, but if I click on it one more time, remember we can resize. So I'll move to the center left, get the double-headed arrow, and drag to the left until this fits where I need it to. Go ahead and drag a little bit more from the right-hand side. And again, if you need to continue editing, you can double-click or you can right-click and edit. And then just click off of it when I'm done. With it selected one more time, I can use my arrow key to nudge it a little bit more to the right. So you get the idea. This can take a little bit of time to get it perfect, but really the basics are pretty simple. So now that I've created a new title, what do I want to do next? Well, I want to start branding it. I want to use my company colors, maybe put in things like logos and things like that. Well, what I'd like to do first is make the title of this a purple color, because that's one of the options that we have. I could right-click and choose Properties, or I have this Properties toolbar. So I could change the font, the size, bold, italics, underline, font color, fill color, edit the text, which we already did, or go to Other Properties. Let's just use the drop-down for the font, and let's go to More Colors. And let's see if we can find a color that we like. I'm thinking maybe something like this here. I can get very carried away with this. You can work with RGB values, hue, saturation, and luminosity. And if that's going to be a custom color, you could actually keep it. So once you define your company color, you don't have to recreate it every time. I'm just going to go ahead and select this one and say OK. And of course, we can see that that color is now applied. Now let's go ahead and do just a couple more things, and then we'll move down to the bottom of the invoice. Let me move this toolbar down a little bit, because I think it's looking a little bit crowded up here at the top. So let me select my products and services. The control is currently too big. It doesn't have to be that big, so I'm just going to make it smaller. Then I'm going to use something called a lasso, where I press and hold my left mouse button and I drag to create a rectangle. When I do that and let go of my mouse, everything inside of that rectangle will be selected. That's the fast way to do a multiple select. And then I'm just going to use my arrow keys to nudge down that entire group to make a little bit more space. A little more nudging of our title. There we go. And now we're ready to move down to the bottom of the invoice. I'll use my scroll button on the bottom right. And notice at the very bottom of the invoice, I have a field that's going to show my finance charge warning messages. Well, I'd like to kind of, pretty this up. We're a spa, so a black and white invoice is kind of boring. And I'm thinking that maybe one of the ways to do that would be to add a bar or a line, if you will. If I move to the toolbar on the left-hand side, I have an Add button. And when I click on this, I can see all the different things that I can add in the Form Designer. Logos or images, data from Peachtree, text like we were just working with, a shape, a line, a column to a table, or another type of object like an Olay object. I'm going to choose line, and I'm simply going to drag a line near the bottom. Remember, it doesn't have to be positioned exactly right because we can always modify it. Do notice that you have to kind of drag a straight line, or at least when you get to where you want it to end, then make sure that you drag up and down until it looks nice and straight. That should be it. I'll let it go. And now for my formatting toolbar, I'm going to click my Properties button. I actually am going to place some text on top of this line, so I'm going to change the thickness. And you may not know what this is, so you can kind of nudge it up and down. I know that I want 25. I also know that I want to change the color, so I'll click the right arrow next to color, and I'll go ahead and choose kind of a pinkish color. And we'll say OK. Say OK again. And now we can see that we have a nice thick line. I'm going to use my arrow keys to move that down. And when I have it basically at the bottom of the page, right at my bottom margin, then I want to click on my Finance Charge Warning Message control, and I want to move that one down so it's right on top of the bar. But wait a second, you say, it disappeared. We have to remember that there's a stacking order. In other words, my bar, since it was created after the original control, is sitting on top of it. Well, that's not a problem. We just need to reorder it. If I right-click, I can choose Order, and I can edit my print order. Notice that it's helpful to see what you have selected. Originally, I had the control for the finance charge statement selected, but then I right-clicked on my line. So the line is currently highlighted, and you can see it's all the way at the bottom. Now this is kind of counterintuitive. In the stacking order, things that are on the bottom actually appear on the top of the form. I know that doesn't make sense. What I need to do is I need to click the Up button so that this is actually sitting on top of the statement charge. The statement charge happens to be number 56. So let's go ahead and click Up until we get this in the right position. Notice that right now the line is below or after the finance charge in our order box. Now I'm going to click Move It Up one more time, and you instantly see that our finance charge now appears on top. That's exactly what we wanted. We also can use this to delete things or to edit them. I simply wanted to rearrange it. I'll say OK. Then I'll click back on my finance charge and just nudge it until it's centered in our bar. And that'll make it just a little bit nicer to look at. If you wanted to insert a picture, for example, and have that appear as the background of your form, you could use the Add button, say Add a Picture, and then you would simply change the order, making it number 1. As I said, it's kind of counterintuitive, but your background image would be the number 1 in the order box. Well, what else can we do with our form? We've done some things just to kind of pretty it up, but how about the actual functionality? Well, let me go ahead and scroll up a little bit here so we can see what is actually comprising our invoice. Now this shouldn't be too surprising to you because we've all seen invoices a million times. We have kind of a grid here that's going to display the quantity, the item, the description, the unit price, and the amount. In Peachtree, the item is actually the item number. And for my clients, this really isn't anything that's important. They're coming to a spa and they don't care to know a bunch of codes. They just know that they got a full facial or an herbal scrub. That's going to be good enough. So to simplify this, I want to remove the item from this particular copy of the invoice. I'll do this by right-clicking Item, choose Add Remove Columns, and from the list where I can see everything that's in here, I can simply select what I don't want to see. I don't want to see item, so I'll click to remove the field. You also can see that you can designate the width here. You can make a format. For example, you can have things as numbers or letters, and you also can do the alignment of the title. With those, you also can format all of the field headings, as well as the data, and even borders. So there's a lot of good information here by simply right-clicking. And notice that the name of the dialog box is Column Data Options. We can't actually work with the individual field. We access the individual fields from within this option. Let me go ahead and say OK. And we can see that that has disappeared, but I also see that it took out kind of some of my spacing. So I'm going to move to the right side of this entire control, get a double-headed arrow, and drag back over to the right, and then work with the column widths using the double-headed arrows to just make sure that these are sized appropriately. The description, of course, is going to be my largest field. So you can do something like that.